They built a pool on my property. Too bad I own the water rights. Picture this. You wake up one morning to find construction crews digging a massive pool on your land. The HOA president stands there with a smug smile, telling you it's for community enhancement, and you should feel honored. But what they don't know is that you hold something more powerful than any HOA rulebook, something that's about to turn their dream pool into their worst nightmare. Sometimes the best revenge comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes it flows like water through generations of family secrets. Meet Sarah Chen, a 34-year-old software engineer who inherited her grandmother's modest 2-acre property along Willow Creek 3 years ago. While tech millionaires built sprawling mansions upstream, Sarah genuinely loved her simple 1950s-style ranch house with its sprawling backyard that stretched down to the creek bed. The property had been in her family since 1952, when her grandmother bought it for practically nothing because nobody wanted land that flooded sometimes. Sarah worked remotely for a Silicon Valley startup, which meant she could live anywhere she wanted. She chose to stay right here, tending her grandmother's vegetable garden and enjoying the peaceful sound of water trickling over smooth stones. Her neighbors were mostly retirees who'd lived there for decades. Quiet folks who waved from their porches and minded their own business. Everything changed when Prestigious Pines Homeowners Association formed around her property 18 months ago. A developer named Marcus Whitfield had bought up 6 adjacent lots, demolished the old houses, and built million-dollar luxury estates with names like Willow, Manor, and Creek View Mansion. The new neighborhood association immediately began pressuring Sarah to upgrade her property or sell to a developer. The pressure started subtly. Marcus would stop by during his evening walks, commenting on how charming her little house was, but how much potential the land had. His wife Jennifer would mention at the grocery store how exciting it must be to live surrounded by such ambitious neighbors who were really investing in the community. Other new residents began leaving pamphlets in her mailbox about maximizing property values and community standards. Sarah politely declined every suggestion, every offer, and every not-so-subtle hint. She had no intention of changing her grandmother's house or selling the land that held 3 generations of family memories. Her vegetable garden produced enough tomatoes and zucchini to share with half the neighborhood. Her small workshop in the converted garage was perfect for her woodworking hobby. The creek provided endless entertainment as she watched seasons change through her kitchen window. But Marcus Whitfield wasn't the kind of man who took no for an answer, especially when that no stood between him and his vision of a perfect, upscale community. Sarah would soon learn that some people believe money and position give them the right to steamroll over anyone who doesn't fit their plans. The real trouble was just beginning. Chapter 2, The Unwelcome Welcome Committee. It started on a Tuesday morning in March with a certified letter that made Sarah's coffee go cold. The envelope bore the official seal of Prestigious Pines Homeowners Association, and inside was a bill that took her breath away. $3,000 in retroactive community improvement fees plus $450 in monthly dues. Effective immediately. Sarah read the letter twice, certain there had to be a mistake. According to HOA President Marcus Whitfield, her property was now grandfathered into the association, despite the fact that she had never signed any agreement, attended any meetings, or agreed to join anything. The letter cited community enhancement projects including new street lighting, landscape maintenance, and architectural oversight services that Sarah never requested and certainly never approved. When Sarah called the number listed, Marcus's assistant cheerfully informed her that all property owners in the designated area are automatically included for the benefit of community standards. Sarah asked to speak with Marcus directly, but was told he was in meetings and would get back to her soon. He got back to her all right. 3 days later, Marcus showed up at her front door with 2 other board members, Jennifer Whitfield, his wife and community standards director, and Robert Chen, no relation to Sarah despite sharing her last name, who served as architectural compliance officer. Marcus didn't bother with pleasantries. Standing on her grandmother's hand-painted welcome mat, he looked around her property with obvious disdain. "Your shabby little house is bringing down everyone's property values," he said. Not even trying to hide his contempt. "We're implementing new architectural standards, and frankly, your place doesn't meet them." Jennifer pulled out a folder thick with documents and photos. Sarah realized with growing horror that they had been surveilling her property, taking pictures from multiple angles, documenting everything from her grandmother's vintage mailbox to the small herb garden by her kitchen window. "These are the required modifications," Robert announced, handing her a violation notice that made her hands shake. The list was staggering. Install a new clay tile roof to match community aesthetics, repaint the entire house in one of 5 approved color palettes, replace all windows with period-appropriate styles, remove the unsightly vegetable garden and replace it with professionally designed landscaping, and upgrade the driveway with natural stone materials. The estimated cost, $60,000, for modifications to her own home. Modifications she never wanted and couldn't afford. "This is insane," Sarah managed to say. "I never joined your HOA. You can't just force me to spend my life savings because you don't like how my house looks." Marcus smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Actually, we can. The city recognizes our authority over this designated improvement district. You have 60 days to begin compliance, or we'll file liens against your property and begin legal proceedings. We're really trying to help you," Jennifer added with fake sweetness. "Your grandmother's house is ... quaint ... but it's 1952. This is 2024. Time to move forward with the times." As they walked away, Sarah heard Marcus telling Robert, if she can't afford to maintain property standards, she shouldn't be living here. "We'll get that land one way or another." That night, Sarah barely slept. She kept thinking about her grandmother's stories of buying this land when nobody else wanted it, of building a life from nothing, of creating a home that had sheltered 3 generations of their family. Now strangers were demanding she destroy everything her grandmother had built, simply because they had decided she didn't fit their vision of perfection. But Marcus Whitfield had made one crucial mistake. He thought Sarah was just another obstacle to remove. He had no idea who he was really dealing with, or what kind of fight he had just picked. The worst was yet to come. Marcus wasn't bluffing about the legal pressure. Within 2 weeks of their confrontation, Sarah's life became a daily nightmare of harassment disguised as community enforcement. Every morning brought new violation notices, each one more ridiculous than the last. The HOA sent inspectors who photographed her house from every possible angle, documenting supposed violations like non-compliant exterior paint color, even though her house had been the same cheerful yellow for 20 years. They cited her for unapproved exterior modifications because her grandmother's hand-carved mailbox didn't match the community. Standard black metal boxes that cost $400, each from an approved vendor. The harassment escalated quickly. Sarah received a formal complaint for excessive noise disturbance because she mowed her lawn at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, the same time she'd been doing it for 3 years. Another violation arrived for unauthorized gardening activities because her tomato plants were allegedly not in compliance with landscape design standards. The HOA's tactics grew more aggressive each week. They hired a lawyer who sent threatening letters about property value damage and community degradation. They organized neighborhood meetings where residents complained about that one house that was supposedly preventing everyone else's property values from reaching their full potential. Sarah attended one of these meetings, hoping to reason with her neighbors and explain her position. Instead, She found herself facing a room full of hostile faces as Marcus led what felt more like a public shaming session than a community discussion. The Chen property represents everything we're trying to move away from, Marcus announced to the packed room. Outdated architecture, inappropriate land use, and frankly, a complete disregard for community standards that the rest of us are working so hard to maintain. Jennifer stood up, holding poster-sized photos of Sarah's house taken from unflattering angles. Look at these images. This is what potential buyers see when they drive through our neighborhood. How are we supposed to attract quality residents when visitors think they've stumbled into some kind of rural farming community? Sarah tried to speak to explain that she loved her home and had every right to live peacefully on her own property. But every time she raised her hand, Marcus directed the conversation elsewhere. And when she finally stood up to talk, residents began talking over her or checking their phones dismissively. The meeting's climax came when Marcus unveiled what he called the crown jewel project that would finally bring prestigious Pines up to the standard our community deserves. On a large screen, he displayed architectural renderings of a luxury swimming pool and clubhouse complex, complete with a fitness center, spa facilities, and outdoor entertainment areas. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized where the proposed construction would take place. The beautiful artist's rendering showed the pool and clubhouse built exactly where her backyard currently stood, right in the middle of her grandmother's apple orchard that still produced fruit every fall. We've consulted with legal experts about the most efficient way to proceed, Marcus continued, his voice growing more confident as residents murmured approval. The community's needs override individual selfishness. We're prepared to use eminent domain proceedings if necessary to acquire the land required for this essential community improvement. The room erupted in applause. Sarah looked around at faces she recognized from the grocery store, from the post office, from 3 years of friendly neighborhood interactions. Now they were clapping enthusiastically at the idea of taking her land by force. The pool complex will add at least $50,000 in value to every home in prestigious Pines, Jennifer added. We're talking about transforming this into a truly elite community that attracts serious buyers. Robert Chen stood up to present the timeline. Construction begins in 60 days, whether we have voluntary cooperation or not. The legal process for community improvement projects is well established. Property owners who refuse to participate in community enhancement can be compelled to sell at fair market value. As residents filed out, chatting excitedly about their future pool parties and spa days, Marcus approached Sarah with that same cold smile. You can make this easy on yourself, he said quietly. We're prepared to offer you fair market value for your property. You could buy something more appropriate somewhere else. This land has been in my family for over 70 years, Sarah replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. My grandmother built her life here. I'm not selling, Marcus shrugged. Then we'll take it. Either way, that pool is getting built. The community has spoken. As Sarah drove home that night, she felt more alone than she had since her grandmother's death. It seemed like the entire neighborhood had turned against her, united in their belief that her property was theirs to take whenever they decided they wanted it. But Sarah had forgotten something important about her family's history with this land. Something her grandmother had mentioned in passing over the years, something that seemed unimportant until now, something that was about to change everything. That night, she would make a phone call that would remind her she wasn't as powerless as Marcus Whitfield believed. The fight was far from over. That night, Sarah sat in her grandmother's old rocking chair, feeling overwhelmed and defeated. The HOA seemed to have every legal advantage, unlimited money for lawyers, and the support of the entire neighborhood. She was one person against an organized group that had already decided her fate. In desperation, she called her Aunt Rose in Oregon, her grandmother's younger sister, who was now 87 years old but still sharp as ever. Sarah needed family support, someone who would understand why this land meant so much to her. "Oh, honey," Aunt Rose said after hearing the whole story, "those people picked a fight with the wrong family. Did you forget what Grandma always used to say about that land? She didn't just buy property back in 1952. She bought something much more valuable." Sarah's heart skipped. "What do you mean? The water rights?" "Dear, your grandmother bought the water rights to the entire creek system. Those papers should be in her old cedar chest in the bedroom, along with the original 1850 mining claim that gives your family control over Willow Creek's water flow." Sarah's hands began to shake. "Water rights? I thought that was I figured that was just historical stuff." Aunt Rose chuckled, but her voice carried steel underneath the warmth. "Historical nothing. Those rights are active and legal. Your great-great-grandfather bought them from a failed mining operation back in 1850. The family has maintained and renewed them every generation since. Grandma was very careful about keeping those papers current, especially after developers started sniffing around in the 80s. But what does that actually mean?" Sarah asked, her mind racing. "It means you control the water that feeds every fancy house in that development. Every drop that comes through their pipes, fills their pools, waters their lawns, and supplies their kitchens comes from the aquifer system that flows directly under your land. Those water rights predate every single property deed in that neighborhood by over a century." Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. "Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain these rights are still valid? Honey, your grandmother renewed them just 5 years ago, right before she got sick. She always said that water would be more valuable than gold someday, and that our family would need to protect what she'd preserved for us. Go look in that cedar chest. Everything you need should be there." After hanging up, Sarah rushed to her grandmother's bedroom, which she'd barely touched since inheriting the house. The old cedar chest sat at the foot of the bed, filled with family documents, photo albums, and keepsakes dating back generations. There, in a carefully maintained file folder labeled Property Documents, important, she found papers that made her heart race. Water rights certificates, renewal documents, legal surveys, and correspondence with state agencies dating back decades. Her grandmother had meticulously maintained legal control over Willow Creek and all its tributaries, including the underground springs that fed the entire area's water supply. The most recent renewal was dated just 4 years ago and included a modern geological survey that traced the water flow throughout the region. According to the official documents, the Chen family held exclusive rights to control, divert, or restrict water access for irrigation, recreation, and municipal use within a clearly defined area that encompassed every single house in prestigious Pines. Sarah stayed up until 3 a.m. reading through decades of legal documents, correspondence with water authorities, and detailed maps showing exactly how water flowed through the region. By dawn, she understood something that would change everything. Marcus Whitfield and his luxury development existed entirely at her family's discretion. Every sprinkler system watering those perfect lawns, every swimming pool filled with crystal clear water, every kitchen faucet, every bathroom, every washing machine in prestigious Pines depended on water that legally belonged to Sarah Chen. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah smiled. Marcus had made a fatal error. He assumed that money and legal pressure would be enough to intimidate a woman living alone in an old house. He never bothered to research the history of the land he was trying to steal, or the family that had protected it for over 70 years. Now it was time for Marcus to learn that some fights you should never pick, especially when you don't know who you're really fighting against. The construction crews were scheduled to break ground on her property in less than 60 days. Sarah had a better idea. Let them build their precious pool. Let them fill it with water. Let them celebrate their victory over the little woman who dared to stand in their way, because when they were finished, Sarah was going to teach them exactly what real power looked like, and it was going to flow like water through a pipeline that she controlled completely. Sarah didn't say a single word as construction began on what Marcus insisted on calling community land. She watched from her kitchen window as crews broke ground, poured concrete, and installed expensive pool equipment worth more than her annual salary. Neighbors stopped by to gloat about the progress being made and how much their property values would increase once the obstruction was removed, but Sarah was busy with her own project. She had quietly hired Patricia Morrison, the most respected water rights attorney in the state, a woman who had spent 30 years fighting corporate interests that tried to steal family water claims. Patricia reviewed the Chen family documents with the enthusiasm of someone who rarely got to work with such clear-cut legal precedent. "This is beautiful," Patricia said during their first meeting, spreading the historical documents across her conference table. "Your family has maintained perfect legal documentation for over a century. These rights are absolutely ironclad, and they predate every single property deed, municipal agreement, and development contract in that area. The revenge plan they developed together was elegant in its simplicity." Sarah would let the HOA complete their precious pool project, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on construction, landscaping, and equipment. She would let them fill it with crystal clear water and host their first community pool party. And then she would shut off their water supply. The legal strategy was straightforward. As holder of exclusive water rights, Sarah had the authority to control creek access for any purpose, including irrigation, recreation, and municipal use. The HOA had never requested permission to use Chen family water resources. They had never negotiated usage agreements. They had simply assumed that water was free and unlimited. Like AirDot, they were about to learn how expensive that assumption would be. While construction crews worked on the pool complex, Sarah worked with Patricia to file the appropriate paperwork with state water authorities. Every form was submitted properly, every fee paid promptly, every legal requirement satisfied completely. Sarah was claiming her family's water rights and establishing her authority to control usage by surrounding properties. The process took exactly 6 weeks, which meant Sarah's legal claim would be officially recognized just 3 days after the HOA's scheduled pool opening celebration. During those 6 weeks, Sarah endured constant harassment from neighbors who assumed they had one. Marcus made a point of stopping by her house every few days to gloat about the progress being made on community improvements. Jennifer organized garden parties where residents could watch the construction and discuss how wonderful it would be when the obstruction was finally removed. "You know, it's not too late to be part of the solution instead of the problem," Marcus told Sarah one afternoon as concrete trucks rumbled past her living room window. "We're still prepared to offer fair market value for your property. You could buy something nice in a more appropriate neighborhood." Sarah just smiled and offered him fresh lemonade from her grandmother's recipe. "I'm perfectly happy here, thank you. I hope you enjoy your pool." Marcus looked confused by her calm response, but shrugged it off. He was too busy celebrating his victory to worry about why Sarah seemed so relaxed about losing everything. The pool complex was finished on schedule and looked exactly like the architectural renderings. The kidney-shaped pool sparkled in the afternoon sun, surrounded by professionally landscaped gardens, elegant patio furniture, and a state-of-the-art sound system. The attached clubhouse featured floor-to-ceiling windows, a fully equipped kitchen, and changing rooms that looked like they belonged in an upscale hotel. The grand opening celebration was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, with catered food, a live DJ, and invitations sent to potential buyers who might be interested in purchasing future lots in the development. Marcus had even hired a professional photographer to document the event for marketing materials. On Wednesday, before the big celebration, Patricia Morrison hand-delivered a certified letter to Marcus Whitfield, with copies sent to every member of the HOA board and every homeowner in prestigious Pines. The letter was brief, formal, and devastating. "Please be advised that Sarah Chen, as legal holder of comprehensive water rights to Willow Creek and all associated tributaries, hereby demands immediate cessation of all unauthorized use of Chen family water resources. All affected parties have 30 days to negotiate usage agreements or face immediate termination of water services. This notice is provided in accordance with state water law and is legally binding upon all parties receiving municipal water services within the designated area. Sarah was in her garden picking tomatoes when her phone started ringing. Then her doorbell began chiming continuously. Then neighbors began gathering in her driveway, many of them holding copies of Patricia's letter and looking confused, angry, or panicked. Marcus arrived within an hour, his face red with fury and disbelief. "This is some kind of joke," he shouted across her front yard. "You can't just shut off people's water because you're having a temper tantrum." Sarah walked to her front porch, still wearing her gardening gloves, and smiled at the crowd of neighbors who had spent months treating her like an unwanted pest. "I'm not shutting off anything," she said calmly. "I'm simply exercising my legal right to control water resources that my family has owned for over 70 years. Jennifer Whitfield pushed forward, waving her copy of the letter. "This is insane. You can't hold an entire neighborhood hostage because we built a community pool." "Actually," Sarah replied, "I can. And unless you'd like to negotiate a reasonable usage agreement, that beautiful new pool is going to sit empty while everyone in Prestigious Pines learns what it's like to live without water." The panic in Marcus's eyes was worth every sleepless night Sarah had endured. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she held all the cards, and she was about to play them perfectly. The panic was immediate and absolute. Within hours of receiving Patricia's letter, Marcus had called 3 different law firms, demanding they find some way to challenge Sarah's water rights claim. The answer from every attorney was the same. The Chen family's water rights were completely legitimate, properly documented, and legally unbreakable. Those rights predate the city incorporation, the county zoning laws, and every property deed in your development. The third lawyer explained to Marcus during an emergency phone consultation that Sarah could hear through her open windows. "She can shut off your water tomorrow if she wants to, and there's nothing you can do to stop her by Friday morning, 48 hours before the scheduled pool opening celebration." The mood in Prestigious Pines had shifted from celebration to full-scale crisis. Homeowners who had enthusiastically supported bullying Sarah suddenly realized that their million-dollar properties could become worthless overnight if their water supply disappeared. The gorgeous new pool sat filled with crystal-clear water, but now it looked more like a monument to the HOA's arrogance than a symbol of community success. Everything they had built depended on resources controlled by the woman they had spent months trying to destroy. Marcus called an emergency HOA meeting for Friday evening, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of united neighbors plotting against Sarah, the room was filled with panicked homeowners demanding to know how their board had let this happen. How did nobody know about these water rights? Demanded Robert Vega, who had moved from Los Angeles specifically for the luxury lifestyle Marcus had promised. "I paid $2.4 million for my house based on assurances that this was a stable, well-planned community." Jennifer tried to maintain her composure, but her voice cracked as she explained that their lawyers were exploring all options. The truth was that no options existed. Sarah's legal position was unassailable, and everyone in the room was beginning to understand that their perfect community existed entirely at her discretion. "We need to negotiate with her," said Patricia Wong, whose house backed up to the new pool complex. "Whatever she wants, we need to give it to her. My landscaping alone cost $80,000, and it'll all die without consistent water access." Marcus's face had gone pale as the financial implications became clear. The homeowners weren't just panicking about their lawns and swimming pools. They were realizing that houses without guaranteed water access would be impossible to sell, impossible to insure, and potentially uninhabitable during any drought conditions. The meeting devolved into chaos as residents demanded answers that Marcus couldn't provide. Some blamed him for not researching the property thoroughly before beginning construction. Others questioned whether the entire development project had been planned properly. A few began talking about lawsuits against the HOA for failing to protect their property values. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather for a pool opening, celebration that nobody wanted to attend anymore. The caterers showed up on schedule, along with the DJ and the professional photographer Marcus had hired to document the community's success. But instead of celebration, there was only tension as residents gathered around the pool complex, staring at water they might not be able to access much longer. Sarah chose that moment to make her appearance. She walked across her backyard wearing a simple sundress and carrying a plate of her grandmother's homemade cookies, as if she were attending a neighborhood potluck instead of the funeral of her enemy's dreams. "I thought you might be hungry," she said pleasantly, offering cookies to the caterers who looked confused about whether they were supposed to be setting up for a party or packing up to leave. Marcus approached her with the desperate look of a man whose entire world was crumbling. "Sarah, we need to talk. We can work this out. What do you want?" Sarah looked around at the beautiful pool complex, the elegant landscaping, and the group of neighbors who had spent months treating her like an unwanted obstacle. Then she smiled with the kind of genuine warmth that had been missing from her interactions with these people for far too long. "I want exactly what you demanded from me," she said. "I want $450 per month from each household for water usage rights. I want a $60,000 infrastructure maintenance fund to ensure continued service reliability, and I want the same respect you show each other when you're making decisions that affect this community." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of water circulating through the pool's filtration system. Sarah had turned their own demands against them, using the exact same numbers Marcus had tried to force her to pay, the exact same language Jennifer had used to justify their community improvements. That's completely reasonable," Patricia Wong said quietly, and Sarah could see other residents nodding in agreement. After facing the possibility of losing their water entirely, Sarah's terms seemed generous rather than punitive. Marcus opened his mouth to object, but Robert Vega cut him off. "We'll pay it," he said firmly. "Whatever legal paperwork you need, we'll sign it. We should have treated you with respect from the beginning instead of trying to force you out." Jennifer Whitfield, who had spent months photographing Sarah's property and criticizing her lifestyle choices, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "We were wrong," she said. "We got caught up in this idea of perfection and forgot that you're our neighbor, not our enemy. I'm sorry we made you fight for what was already yours." By Sunday evening, half the HOA board had resigned in disgrace, and Marcus had quietly put his house on the market. The pool opening celebration had been canceled, but Sarah's victory celebration was just beginning. She had proven that real power doesn't come from money or intimidation tactics. It comes from knowing your rights, standing your ground, and having the patience to let bullies destroy themselves. The pool complex remained, but now it served as a daily reminder to everyone in prestigious Pines that their neighbor Sarah Chen was not someone to underestimate. And the water flowing through their pipes carried a lesson that would benefit the entire community for years to come. 6 months later, Sarah's property had never looked better. The monthly water usage fees from her formerly hostile neighbors had funded improvements she'd been dreaming about for years: a new greenhouse for starting seedlings, professional repairs to her grandmother's workshop, and a beautiful stone pathway connecting her house to the creek where 3 generations of her family had found peace. The empty pool still sat in what had been her backyard, but now it served a completely different purpose. Sarah had graciously allowed the community to keep their expensive concrete investment, but under new management, instead of an exclusive club for luxury homeowners. It had become a genuine community gathering space where neighbors actually got to know each other as people rather than property values. children from the older part of the neighborhood, kids whose families had been quietly excluded from Marcus's vision of perfection, now played in the pool alongside the children of tech executives. Sarah hosted monthly potluck dinners where everyone brought dishes to share, and the pool area had become the heart of a community that finally felt like neighbors instead of competitors. The new HOA board, elected after Marcus's resignation and exodus, treated Sarah with the genuine respect she should have received from day one. They consulted her on community decisions, valued her input on neighborhood issues, and had even created a community history position specifically for her, recognizing that her family's 70-year connection to the land made her the neighborhood's institutional memory. Sarah's vegetable garden had expanded beautifully. With the additional income from water rights fees, she now supplied fresh produce to 3 local restaurants and had started a small farmers market booth that drew customers from across the city. The garden that Jennifer Whitfield had once called unsightly was now featured in the local newspaper as an example of sustainable urban farming. The Chen family water rights had become a source of pride rather than conflict. Sarah worked with environmental groups to ensure the creek system remained healthy and sustainable, implementing conservation measures that benefited the entire watershed. Her control over water resources had evolved from a weapon of revenge into a tool for responsible community stewardship. Most satisfying of all was the culture of exclusion and intimidation that Marcus had fostered was replaced by genuine cooperation and mutual support. Neighbors helped each other with yard work, shared tools and resources, and had learned to value diversity in housing styles, income levels, and lifestyle choices. Sarah kept her grandmother's house exactly as it had always been: cheerful yellow paint, hand-carved mailbox, and vintage charm that now seemed perfectly at home among the modern mansions. But she had added one small improvement that made her smile every time she saw it: a beautiful wooden sign by her front gate that read Chen Family Water Rights, established 1850, protecting community resources for 7 generations. The sign served as a gentle reminder to anyone who might be tempted to repeat Marcus's mistakes. It told the story of a family that had invested in land when nobody else wanted it, maintained their legal rights through decades of careful stewardship, and used their power not for petty revenge but for community building. Sarah often thought about her grandmother's wisdom in maintaining those water rights through all the years when they seemed unnecessary. Her grandmother had understood something that Marcus never learned: real security comes not from controlling other people, but from knowing your own worth and protecting what legitimately belongs to you. The monthly HOA meetings had become genuinely collaborative sessions where residents worked together on neighborhood improvements, safety concerns, and community events. Sarah served as treasurer, managing the water rights fees and ensuring that every dollar was spent transparently on projects that benefited everyone rather than excluding anyone. On quiet evenings, Sarah would sit in her grandmother's rocking chair on the front porch, listening to children playing in the pool that had once symbolized her potential destruction. The sound of water flowing through the creek mixed with laughter and conversation, creating the kind of peaceful community ATM